Hi, everybody. This is Jonathan. I'm sorry I couldn't be here today to hear everybody's presentations, but you get to listen to mine, luckily. It feels very strange recording this into my computer like this, um, alone in my room. It feels a little bit like I'm talking to myself, but nevertheless, I will forge on. This piece does not yet have a title. Um, but the idea comes from a thought that I had a couple weeks ago about the spectralists and what they were doing. Um, I think the spectralists seemed to think they were using um, that they were using technology to investigate the nature of sound. And I'm not quite sure that that's actually what's going on in their music. I think it's quite possible that, in fact, they were using um, acoustic instruments to recreate sounds that they had discovered with electronic technology. Um, in fact, the spectralist practice seems to really focus on synthesizing new sounds using the sort of raw sonic techniques that are only available via electronic technology. For instance, production of pure sine tones, uh, which are then synthesized and serve as a model for instrumental synthesis. Um, you can contrast that with the school of electronic music like musique concrète, where the composers were actually recording um, environmental sound and manipulating it via tape techniques. So spectralism uh, seems like a different thing. At least it seems as though it's doing this other thing in addition to investigating the nature of sound. Seems like in addition to that, it's also investigating the nature of sound technology. The reason that was significant for me was that I got to thinking that the the um, the sonic subject of of spectralist music could be electronic music itself. In other words, electronic music could be used as not quite a found object, but techniques from electronic music, especially popular electronic music, could be appropriated um, and used as a spectral vocabulary. And I really got a big idea about this the other day, uh, listening to an interview with a philosopher named Robin James, who teaches at University of North Carolina in Charlotte. And she's a philosopher, but uh, her work is actually very close to musicology, and she does a lot of sort of pop music musicology. And she has a sort of term of art for a technique in electronic pop music. She calls it a soar, um, SOAR. You've all heard soars. You all know what they are. It's when the percussive element of a song exponentially accelerates and ceases to be percussive interjection and instead becomes uh, pitch or pitched noise material. Um, I think it's often also called a sweep. It's the thing that comes right before the drop in a song. Um, I thought I'd play one very familiar one just very quickly so that you'll all know what I'm talking about. Okay, so you know what this is all about. It is sort of in curious agreement with Stockhausen's observation that that rhythm and frequency are really very similar concepts. In fact, a steady rhythm speeded up to enough cycles per second will produce a pitched sound. Of course, this is only possible to do with computers, um, or rather, it's only possible to do with electronic instruments. Um, and those are the instrumental resources embraced by these pop music composers and producers. Um, I thought I'd quickly read a little bit of what Robin James says is the purpose of this technique. This is from her essay in the new inquiry called Loving the Alien, and I should apologize for linking you to the new inquiry. Um, I wouldn't normally do that. They are fake socialists and bad people, but this is a good essay. Um, Let me find the starting spot here. Um, Sorry, I'm just taking a second to remember where I wanted to start. Okay, here we go. Riding the crest of auditory or machinic burnout, these songs mimic in music the generalized affective experience of privilege and neoliberalism. Listening to this music, people get to feel something like privilege, even and especially if they're not privileged. Yet at the same time, by tarrying with burnout, or, more important, zero intensity, what philosopher Giorgio Agamben calls bare life, EDM lets listeners experience what feels like risk, indulgence, and excess, but is actually very tightly and carefully controlled. All excess, all deviance, is always already accounted for in the statistical asymptotic logic of the sine wave. Take the bass too low, for example, and it sounds like percussive clicks, not a pitch. As Atali argued, what seem superficially like chance events are the products of careful management which ensures against the emergence of actual chance occurrences or non-standardizable deviances. And elsewhere, specifically in the interview with Robin James that I heard a while ago, um, she says that the function of a soar in pop music is actually to function as as a sort of injury to the music. It disrupts the music, it rips it apart, but the ultimate purpose of this technique actually is to restore the music to its original state. The beat comes back stronger than before. So the musical material itself is shown to be resilient. It restores order. There's, in a way, the pop music soar is is um, is a way of highlighting the the idea that there is no escape from the imposed musical order. So I got to thinking, what would be a way to take this technique and subvert it? The she mentions the phrase here machinic burnout, which is a bit of an oxymoronic phrase because the you know machines don't really burn out. Certainly, um, frequencies can get elevated to a level where they're beyond our hearing, but that's the fault of our ears, not the fault of the machine. The any laptop will continue doing whatever you tell it to do as long as you want it to keep producing whatever sound there is. So I started to build a patch in Max MSP. My idea was really to capitalize on this idea. First of all, that that rhythm really equals pitch, right? And second of all, that that pitch can constantly rise. It doesn't have to. reimpose its original rhythmic order. It can do something a little bit like a shepherd's tone scale and give the impression of continually coming into being. And then, as a composer, I can make the compositional choice to cut that off wherever feels appropriate. Um, so my score begins with uh, these with these percussive outbursts, which gradually become closer together, um, and because this is impossible to do, well, sorry, the percussive outbursts become closer and closer together, um, eventually forming pitch material of their own. Now, of course, that's very easy to do with electronic instruments. It's not so easy to do with acoustic instruments. So I had to engage in something of an illusion there, illusion, that is. Um, so what this Max MSP patch does is shows some of that. Now, I wasn't able to, because I'm new to Max MSP, I wasn't able to actually get the patch to play the rhythmic outbursts in the way that I wanted. Instead, what you'll hear is a continuous stream of sound, which in my score is broken up into small chunks. Um, the the um, the numbers here, the value of the carrier frequency and the modulating frequency are carefully chosen so that by the time the rhythmic events get so close together that they can't be distinguished, um, we will have already ascended to the natural point, namely 1000 hertz in the carrier frequency and a modulating frequency of 250 hertz. So this first part of the piece um, is essentially a ring modulation of a constantly rising carrier frequency, um, but broken up into small chunks. So I suppose you could say it's almost like granular synthesis that way. The second half of the piece um, continues that first process, but now not broken up, now in a continuous stream of sound, um, while at the same time performing a ring modulation um, on now a much more gradually falling um, modulator. Sorry, on 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 a carrier frequency with a modulator which is much more gradually falling. As you can see in the first half, the the carrier frequency uh, elevates itself by 10 hertz each each 100 milliseconds or tenth of a second. Here, in that same amount of time, the the modulator falls by uh, uh, zero point 0.1 hertz. So it's a much more gradual descent. Um, Now, something funny begins to happen at that point. So I'll refer you to my spreadsheet if I can find it. I seem to have closed it. Let me quickly open this again. Unless it's out here somewhere. There it is. Okay. So this is a spreadsheet that shows carrier, modulator, and sideband frequencies for the first part of the piece, and then down here for the second part. Now, as you can see, what happens as these carrier frequencies move out of the range of hearing, and I've cut them off where they really get too high to hear. What happens there is that um, new sidebands begin to form. I've labeled them difference tones because I've derived them um, by taking differences. You can see here this first difference tone is between the sideband of the second ring modulation and the sideband of the first ring modulation. The second difference tone is from the second sideband band of the first ring modulation and the second sideband of the second ring modulation. Um, and if you look at the chart that I compiled, you can see that there are sort of two different time scales at work here. There's a very fast time scale where things quickly move out of the range of hearing, and then there's a much, much slower time scale. So slow, in fact, that it almost doesn't even register on the chart. These lines over here look like straight lines, but in fact, they are slightly sloped, as you can see from the numbers on the spreadsheet. And this is very, very apparent to the ear. In fact, I think there are far more sideband frequencies than what I've compiled here. You end up getting a very, very complicated upper partials. So essentially what I've done is create a soar, so to speak, which doesn't have to end and which doesn't result in a drop. It extends itself so long that it becomes its own thing, rather than being a technique. If I can be so bold, rather than being a technique, it becomes um, a genre. I mean, it's not actually a genre because there isn't a body of works like this, but you see what I'm saying. It doesn't have to be just one technique that is used for a thing. It can be the subject of a piece on its own. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch this max patch so you can hear a little bit of what this sounds like. Okay, that's probably enough for you. Um, if you want to hear more of it, I've sent along the max patch, so you can play with it as much as you want. Um, Obviously, it doesn't sound as good as Rihanna, but the concept is all there. Um, I realized that I should mention how I picked these values for the apex of the piece. You can see them right here, and I'll load them in again. The reason I chose those is because when the modulating frequency and the carrier frequency are at those respective values, 1000 hertz and 250 hertz, you produce sidebands which are in a harmonic relationship and, in fact, form a major chord, as you can hear. Well, you can't hear it. You could hear it if the numbers weren't changing. Let me try that again. Um, I'll just very quickly disconnect that. And disconnect that. Alright. You can especially hear it when the amplitude is lower. So yeah, that's how I picked those values. Um, yeah, so that's uh, kind of what I did. So thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you all when I get back.